Yet another breach due to cloud misconfiguration. Is your data secured?
Hey, Mike, it's good to see your smiling face. I hear you have a story for us about some data exposed by a popular keyring app. What can you tell us?
So this is, we've had stories that are similar to this in the past, really a public cloud exposure due to a misconfiguration. So like you mentioned, Keyring is a digital wallet app, has 14 million users across North America, and it's for things like gift cards, membership cards, reward cards. Some folks do actually put their credit card on there. Can they take basic pictures of both sides, say the number and the CVV? And they unfortunately had a breach recently where they exposed about 44 million IDs across those 14 million users. So these researchers from VPN Mentor stumbled upon these 5 misconfigured S3 buckets. So S3 is simple storage service. It's an AWS service, which effectively is these buckets. You can store object data, but they found these exposed databases, which included all these various credentials for all the different cards that this digital wallet keeps track of. So the researchers disclosed the exposure to Keyring. It was addressed, but unfortunately, it leaves all these users open to potential for fraud, for identity theft. Obviously, use of maybe their credit cards or any of the cards that they really have out on an application.
So this is an application, if I understand it right, that you just take pictures of your existing credit cards or membership cards, and then you carry that around instead of carrying your wallet full of cards. Is that right?
That's right. So it seems to be mostly photo-based, like you just mentioned. So you're basically taking pictures just so you don't have to carry around all those physical cards.
Okay. And the problem here was that there were some S3 buckets in Amazon that were misconfigured, and the VPN Mentor guys found that, right?
Yeah, that's right. So it's getting a little more difficult to actually have a public S3 bucket. AWS has this whole shared responsibility model with what they're responsible for and what the applications are responsible for. They put a lot of controls in place to make sure when you create an S3 bucket, by default, it's private, right? It's not public. So you really have to purposely enable public access. So that's either the assumption here. There's not a lot of details on exactly how they stumbled upon this. There are some new techniques for basically doing like S3 bucket enumeration, right? So you kind of try a URL to see if the bucket exists or not. You kind of will get this response. Usually if it's unauthenticated, you'll still get a response. So you kind of can do these scanning. They may have happened upon it in maybe a GitHub reference or something. But essentially these buckets are open to the public. Anyone who happens upon that URL is able to see any of the contents. So there was one bucket that effectively I think had the user data, and they mentioned there were 4 others that were more related to internals for that for Keyring. So maybe some of their internal infrastructure that were also exposed. So yeah, it's a problem that we continue to see, even though it's becoming more and more difficult to purposely expose these buckets.
So it sounds to me like there are things in place that Amazon has put there to prevent this from accidentally happening, and there are probably some things that developers can do just to keep this from accidentally happening from changes that they've made. Is there any recommendation that you would give to, say, a user of this application at this point? Like, what can they do about the situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult for some of the things like your gift cards or your reward cards being exposed. Obviously, for credit cards that may be on that a part of that exposure, a part of this application, you want to obviously cancel those, and then maybe look to utilizing or reaching out to the various companies for the different rewards or gift cards. They mentioned, I think Walmart was a large percentage of the exposed gift cards. So, just understand that as part of this, if you utilize that app, there's a good potential that someone may have access to all that data. So there are some ways that applications and companies can protect themselves against this type of exposure. There's lots of cloud native tooling. There's third party. There's even a lot of open source that will monitor your configurations, look for specific issues like public buckets, and even do sometimes auto remediation, certainly alerting. So you need to have visibility, certainly in public cloud, into all your resources, all their configurations. You don't have that traditional perimeter that you're used to, right, providing extra protection. So keeping inventory of resources, keeping track of configurations, understanding what the vulnerable or exposed configurations are. So you have some kind of specific knowledge of that specific cloud service provider and their specific services. But you definitely want to make sure you're monitoring. There are a few use cases for having a public bucket, right? Something like maybe an end user agreement we've seen, and kind of best practices are you should definitely have a registry of those. You should know which ones are supposed to be public, and certainly, anything that shows up that is public, it's not a list, you need to make sure you're proper remediation.
All right, sounds like a solid list of tips for people to follow. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for bringing the story to us.
All right, thanks, Matt.